Good morning, everyone. My name is Alex Belisario. My pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I work at the University of California, Santa Cruz, and I'm the moderator for this next panel, Career Advice for College Geeks. So as Brian mentioned, if you were in the first session, I am one of the original GeekED crew, and I'm excited to be here every year. It's actually exciting to be able to see you all and exchange ideas together and have new and interesting and different panelists going on. So I was going to give our panelists this morning a chance to introduce themselves briefly, where you work, your pronouns, and the geekiest thing you do at work.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Emily Sandoval. I use she, her, hers pronouns. I am currently the Interim Associate Vice Provost for Student Affairs at the University of Southern California. The geekiest thing I get to do in between going to a whole lot of meetings is decorating my office with my geekdom and my fandom. So I have a huge Pop Funko collection in the corner of my office that normally gets people to double take and look behind them and then look at me and then look back at the Pop figures. But I'm very proud of those Pop figures, as well as some Hamilton artwork and Buffy the Vampire Slayer artwork I have in my office.
My name is Keith Chow, he, him. I run a website called The Nerds of Color, but I also work in public school education. I'm an operations manager for a nonprofit. We work with urban schools around the country. I also used to be a high school English teacher, so we'll talk more about that. The geekiest thing I do is I run a website called The Nerds of Color, and it's like the 24/7 geekiness. I work from home, so like my office is bespeckled with toys and posters and everything. So it's like I live in it all the time. I need to get out of it sometimes. I feel like I'm a little overwhelmed by it. But yeah, that's me.
Hi everybody, Dustin Ramsdell, he, him pronouns, and I am currently working as a senior student success lead for Needle Partners. We partner with universities to help develop high-quality digital education programs. So, nerdiest thing that I do is kind of more I work remotely from home, and I have a very geeky office as well, which I always love seeing other people's as well. But so I have a side project I've been doing for a very long time called Higher Ed Geek. So talking about higher ed, just geeking out about that, but also all the other things that I geek out about. I've been writing on that blog for a long time. I've done a podcast there for over a year and a half. So just really enjoy talking to interesting people and what they geek out about. And I've been podcasting in general for a very long time just because I love the medium, which I feel like it's kind of more mainstream now, but it's sort of been geeky kind of content medium. But so yeah, I think that would probably be the biggest geeky thing.
Hi everyone, my name is Asya Cook. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm currently a resident director at UCLA, and the geekiest thing that I have done for work was to plan a week-long Geek Week experience to help students plan and live out their different fandoms and learn a little something as well. And then aside from that, my office is filled with DC comic art because I love DC Comics.
Great, thank you. So this morning, we're talking a little bit about trying to link passion to profession. And we know that this is a common challenge, not just for our college students, a lot of who we work with directly, but for people in general. And statistics say that workers in the U.S. are finding general job satisfaction, and it's actually increased, which is nice, from like 48 to maybe even 60%. But a smaller percentage in the mid-40s actually feel happy at work, and only about 20% feel highly engaged in their work. And so one of the ways that people can feel engaged is to find their passion in what they're doing. And so we were thinking that working in higher education, we can learn from Comic-Con and the folks who are here, ways to put those passions together in the workplace. So in particular, how we can help our students or ourselves find work that utilizes our passions, and advice that we can pick up and share with each other for folks who have a particular skill set or a passion, and how to look for that in their major or direction for career. So I have a few starter questions for the panel, and then we'll have a little bit of time for you to ask questions that you might have. So if you have some that you've already thought of, then feel free to hold on to those for a little bit longer, and then we'll ask the group. So to begin, for you all, what is your career origin story, and how have you incorporated your geek passions into your career?
All right, so I have been, the majority of my career has been in residential life and housing at colleges and universities. So for me, along my profession, fell into that. I really loved working with students. I love supervising professionals. I love team development, organizational management. I geek out about that. But in 2011, when GeekED first started, there was a group of student affairs professionals that got together to talk about what we were passionate about, and Alex and Elde in the audience are two of the original GeekED members, along with myself. And we're not professors in the classroom, and we found a lot of work out there around teachers who were integrating geek pedagogy into the classroom, which was amazing. And you could take courses on philosophy and Harry Potter, and feminism, and there's articles on feminism in Joss Whedon, and that's fantastic, but we're outside of the classroom. So trying to incorporate my passion for working with students who identify as geeks and nerds, who in my generation were bullied for that. Some are still bullied. It is becoming more mainstream and cool to be geek. Thank you, Marvel and Star Wars, for that resurgence. But trying to do the outside of the classroom connection is how I was able to incorporate my geek passion into my profession. And it was actually Elde in 2011 who looked at me and said, "You're going to go back to school and you're going to write a dissertation on this." And I laughed at him, because why would any professor take me serious? But they did. I introduced myself as doctor. So my dissertation was about utilizing geek culture on a college campus to help students connect with each other, and for us as professionals to create engagement opportunities outside of the classroom. So that's been fulfilling for me and enlightening for me, that as a senior director of residential education and now an associate vice provost for student affairs, I can still keep my office a geeky space for the times I meet with professionals and students, but I could encourage my staff to create those opportunities and connect with students in their passion, which most people would look at us and think, oh, you can't exert your geek passion in your workplace. But I do, and we do.
My secret origin, I was minding my own business one day, and I was bitten by a radioactive nerd. And ever since, as I said earlier, I was a high school teacher. When I came out of college, I went straight to the classroom. And from the jump, I was incorporating comics, and I was an English teacher, so I was incorporating comics into my lesson plans. One of the first lesson plans I gave as a high school teacher was I would give kids a quote-unquote silent comic, a comic without words, like an Owly comic or something like that, and then ask them to read it. And the blank looks would be like, "Mr. Chow, there's no words, how can I read it?" And then, kind of build their multiple intelligences and build their media literacy to say that, like, reading isn't just pronouncing letters. It's using the images and words. This is why I love comics. Comics kind of forces you to combine the text and the image. And just from jump, I was always I wasn't ashamed to incorporate comics. I was lucky that my local comic shop, when Free Comic Book Day was over, they would have the surplus of comics. They would just give them to me, so I was like distribute them in the classroom. And from that I actually got a job working for Diamond Comic Distributors as their education marketing specialist, helping market comic books to the library and school markets. And then just from there, I published a series of graphic novels focusing on Asian American superheroes, and that exposed me to the wider geek world. And then from that, I formed the Nerds of Color as an outlet to talk about representation in geek spaces. Because the interesting thing about being geek is that you're always kind of, until now, right, before Marvel and everything, before Disney actually, yeah. You were marginalized for your interests, for your pursuits. And then as a person of color in a marginalized space, you were even further marginalized. And so I wanted to create a space where folks like us could talk about the things we love and also critique the things we love, because when you love something, you want to improve it. And that was the origin of the Nerds of Color. And we've been going strong ever since.
Yeah, so I think for me, I was a really shy, uninvolved nerd growing up, just staying at home most of the time, playing video games with my brother. Certainly some of the best memories of my life. But even with that, it was only in college was I feeling kind of inspired and kind of compelled to put myself out there, grow and learn, find my leadership style, communication style, and just being comfortable with who I was. So. Wearing this shirt in college, just love college. Want to pay it forward, help other students kind of find themselves, find their path, whatever that is. So kind of parlayed being an RA, getting involved in campus, to pursuing a master's degree in higher ed. And after working full time as a resident director for 2 years, something I may talk a little bit more about later on, but found my kind of current spot in higher ed tech, and a through line for me of just how kind of my nerdiness or geekiness is sort of manifesting is that I've written and podcasted and just try to put myself out there in a very authentic way, and I can distinguish myself and form really authentic connections that have helped me to meet really great professionals, learn so much, and find job opportunities just myself, and wanting to at least be able to role model that for others of just the value of building those really authentic connections, even digitally, which may not maybe kind of pay dividends until much later, but really just trying to build those connections. That's been, really a big way that my nerdy interests have manifested for me, is just being myself and making those authentic connections.
For me, in order to know who I am and the work that influences me every day is that I was a first-generation college student, a person of low income, and also a person who identified as a person of color. And so that greatly influenced my experience when I went to school. I'm originally from New York City, and I went to school in Vermont. So very, very different environment. And growing up and being in a different environment and it being very foreign to me, my fandoms and geekiness was always a place where I felt like I could truly be myself and be unapologetic of who I was. And then I found another medium to use geek culture as a teaching mechanism to students. In my graduate school program, I just happened to be talking about Law and Order SVU and the conversations that you can have around violence and relationship violence and things of that nature. And people who also really liked that program, they started having really good conversations about the learning and understanding what that means. And so for me, it was a light bulb of I can use people's fandoms and as a way of connecting social issues to something that's really popular. And so from that instance, I try really hard to continue to incorporate that into the work that I do.
Great, thank you. I realize that there are a few people here now who may not have been here for the first session. So just by a show of hands, how many of you work in higher ed? Oh, more than before. Excellent. Excellent. And how many of you are students? Maybe thinking about careers? Okay, good. That's good to know. Dustin, we're going to start with you on the next question. Was there a turning point where you had to take a leap of faith and move into a new direction without guarantee or success?
Yeah, so kind of what I was getting at with, I didn't want to get ahead of myself because I feel like this is kind of its own piece of my story. So graduated from my master's program, went and worked full-time as a resident director up in Maine for 2 years. Wasn't the best fit, learned a lot in that experience, but was looking for my next opportunity, was looking for something really different, still wanted to work in higher ed, and I stumbled across an opportunity working with a similar company, a different one than where I work now, that is essentially a coach for students that are enrolled in online degree programs. They're a company that partners with universities. They support those students that are in those programs that they've helped to build out. And that transition was moving from Maine to Maryland fairly quickly, doing a job that I had never done before. I'd never worked one-on-one coaching students in graduate degree programs online. Like every part of it, I had never done it before. obviously a large distance to move. It was a completely different culture of a ed tech company versus an institution. And I mean, I got the job, and like I had to kind of talk myself up of just like, they chose you for a reason, like you have transferable skills, it's worthwhile. And it was definitely a very tough experience. I did that job for over 2 years, but I'm typically kind of humble to a fault, but I know when I like tell people, it's like, oh yeah, this thing or that thing about like, my story, they're just like, wow, I mean, that seemed like it was a lot of change at once, and like, it was probably pretty tough to deal with and everything. It's like, yeah, you know what, it was kind of tough at times, but trying to now like really kind of take hold of that story to talk with students, talk with other professionals who might be like feeling stuck, not sure what to do. One, that there's just within my kind of realm of knowledge, like there's a large diversity of opportunities within higher ed, and I know especially as kind of our world and economy is changing, it's like make sure that you're not kind of getting tunnel vision where it's like I can only do what I've done before. It's, if you're very confident and communicate well about the way that you can contribute to any organization, the outcomes you can achieve, then your world opens up a lot, and that as long as you have people, mentors, family, friends, like, and you're making really intentional choices about any sort of big change and leap that you might be making, you'll be able to have that faith to make that leap. Like, you're going to be able to make it confidently enough, even knowing that there's a lot of stuff you might not know about, and you'll be able to handle that. And certainly, like, recognizing now where it's like anything tough coming up, I'm like, you know what, I've been able to handle some tough stuff in the past. I'm going to have a little bit more confidence, and I think that'll just continue to compound, and hopefully be also able to convey that journey and those successes to other people if they're looking to make some kind of big change. So yeah, it's definitely something that I think about often now, of like, pretty big achievement for me.
That's great.
Yeah.
Are there others who have a leap of faith kind of example they want to share?
I mean, for me, as I said, I still have a day job aside from working with the Nerds of Color. I work for a nonprofit, and it's fortunate that they give me the flexibility to also run this, like, and basically it's kind of become its own institution in a way. I can come out to Comic-Con, and I do a podcast, and I write a blog, and it's like I'm able to juggle both, but it is still a juggle, and it was the choice I had to make. But I think I come from this idea, especially being Asian American, there's this stereotype that, like, you can't pursue the arts, you have to be an engineer or a doctor or a lawyer, and that's it. And I have a daughter, and she was supposed to be here, but she's like, I did 4 days of Comic-Con, Dad, I'm gonna just stay home. But she's telling me, I want to be an author, I want to be an actress, and I feel like as an Asian American, even like that, to kind of like break from that stereotype of like forcing your kids into like one path and having that tunnel vision, I think it's an important thing to kind of use to follow your passion, right? And I encourage her to, if she wants to be on Broadway, go for it. Like, you want to be the next Lin-Manuel Miranda, do it. And I think for me, that's the leap of faith. It's to follow what you want to do. And if your passion is engineering, great. But if your passion is playwriting, that's great too.
Yeah, definitely. I think some of the conversations that we've had recently revolve around this idea that if you have a geeky or a nerdy passion, that somehow it means you're also into science.
Right.
And that's definitely not true. There's all kinds of areas where you can share those passions that don't have to do with math or science.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, so as we're talking about success stories, Emily, you want to share a success story with someone that you've coached or mentored into pursuing nerdiness?
Yes, well, and I think not so much the coaching and mentoring, but creating those spaces for students. I think as a professional, as a woman, as a geek, there was instances where when I worked at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, if the students wanted to do a geek-themed program, and we did our Geek Week event, I did it off of the success and the ideas of the students. So at USC, while we're easily connected to industry, our students are very, very driven over there, and I realized if I wanted to do a geek-themed program, I needed a reverse table, which means during the student org fair, I went around with my business card and a flyer that said, do you want to participate in a Geek Week? And I found the geek student orgs. And there was a woman I met, her name is Alina Lewis, so Alina, if you're watching this, hi. She just graduated from USC, but she approached me to do a women in comics panel last year, and then this past spring, a women in comics and animation panel. And for me as a professional, and where the geekiness isn't part of my day-to-day necessarily, what I could do is help foster that idea, reserve the space, find the funding for her, and to create that niche and help her advertise for this event. And she got an internship her last semester at USC because she was able to speak about the Geek Week panel we did the year before. So just opening that door for a student, and because I gave her the leeway, you contact the artists on Twitter, which actually worked and it was amazing. And people responded to her because she was a student. And actually saw one of the artists at Artist Alley on Friday just to say hello and thank her again for talking to our students. But Alina was able to use that as a springboard into her career. And that was amazing. Just the leap of faith to take that initiative to reach out to me, say, hey, you said you're a geek and you want to do these events. And she was part of the comic book club. And it was amazing to just give her that opportunity.
So, Asia, do you have a story of mentorship that you want to share?
Story of mentorship. Yes, I do actually. A student, I remember this was back in grad school, and a student was studying they were pre-med, and they wanted to somehow debunk, create a program to debunk a lot of the the things that they embellish sometimes in Hollywood. And so they created a program and watched like a couple of episodes of a medical drama, and they went with a faculty member to say, hey, can you help us and debunk some of these like myths that are on TV. And it was really engaging because the students, they were really invested in this show is really, really popular, and sometimes people get their medical knowledge from these shows, but it's also really important to try and pull apart what is myth and what is actually true, and how can we use it in everyday life. And so I was like, I know nothing about medical, that's why I'm in higher ed. But if you want, I will be your champion and help you reach out. And so they reached out to a faculty member in a medical school. They then came in and facilitated the program, watched the TV series, and then that was it. And so I think that showed a level of using media as a way to connect, and using fandoms as a way to connect, and then also to teach things to students outside of, hey, this is something that you like.
Yeah, because they often make those connections with the things they see on TV more than, because maybe they don't know a doctor or some other medical professional. Yeah, that reminds me of a faculty member we have at UC Santa Cruz who was a very well-known forensic anthropologist. And I'm like, oh, like bones? And she's like, no, not like bones.
Everybody says that all the time.
Right? Absolutely. I'm like, oh, sorry. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? You don't have an idea that that's what's going on there. So what kinds of advice do you have to share with our audience today about following your passions, building your careers?
Well, I know some of the notes I jotted down from this, because I think it's something I know some people have found helpful, and I know it was very refreshing for me when I have read about this in some books and stuff. It's the book is Real Artists Have Day Jobs. It's a very good book, super easy read, but that idea sort of like really broke down notions of like, I'm doing, and you have the idea like you have a job, but you're still pursuing these kind of side projects that are really meaningful. But if you had, in certain instances, had to make that immediately gainfully employing and like do all of the things that are required with running a company and like paying people and all that, it's like, it'd be really stressful. It actually ruins the thing that you're like really into. So giving things space and time, doing them kind of lean, or like prototyping things and testing them out to see how it works out, see how it feels, and not feeling like because I think some of the zeitgeist out there, of these sort of entrepreneurial, startup ventures or whatever, it's just like, quit everything, cast everything aside, and just like pursue your dreams with, whatever. Just like, I don't think that that's actually like applicable to most people. They can't just abandon a full-time job and just forego all responsibilities to give it all to one thing. You can really get a lot of meaning and a lot of great outcomes out of something without putting a lot of pressure on it to be the thing that you do that pays all of your bills and is like the biggest thing in the world. So
Not everyone has a benefactor who can just
right. Nobody's gonna get be this unicorn and get like millions and millions in funding immediately and whatever. So I think it because that's been my path. I've been writing and podcasting for years, and I love it. But if it had to be the only thing that I did, I would be stressed out all the time, and it would be sort of forcing my hand when I've been able to otherwise keep a full-time job in the field that I love to work in, be gainfully employed, and like take breaks when I need to and bring it back, but still forge a lot of really great connections and have a lot of learning happening for me and share out learning with others. So it doesn't really negate the impact at all, but it helps to alleviate some of the pressure. So I think that can be helpful for professionals, but also working with students if they're trying to figure out what they want to do. It could be find a job that gives you the quality of life to still work on the things that you really enjoy and allow them to sort of be nurtured over time versus like forced to be, the next big thing or whatever.
I actually have a very similar story. I mean, I think part of finding your passion isn't just necessarily the geeky pursuit, but be passionate about the thing that you do. Like I said, my day job is still working with public schools. It's still working in education. That's still it's a passion as well, right? Like so, I think like find a job that you and that sounds kind of like just find a job that you like. Like that's not the best advice. I apologize.
just like that.
Just like that. Just find the job you like. What's wrong with you? But I think it does help to have to like what you do, and then when you're doing the side projects, it doesn't feel like work, right? Like you are really engaging your passion. We're fortunate also that we don't necessarily do a 9 to 5. Like when you work from home, you have more flexibility. But but again, I enjoy the work that I do, so that the Nerds of Color stuff doesn't feel like an added thing. I think similarly, if it was like I had to run it like a business, I would be kind of stressed out. At the same time, I would say that the elephant in the room is money, right? Mm-hmm. And I think as a society, we put a lot of pressure on money. We kind of assume college is like a job factory. If you don't go to you have to go to college, and I mean this is why we need free college. But anyway, but you go to college to get a skill, to get a job, and then when you just plug the cog into the machine. And I think we need to kind of recalibrate how we view education. And if you follow like a major or a passion that you are interested in, those skills are transferable to any job. Really, you know what I mean? Like I said earlier, no shade to any engineering majors in the room, but like if that's not your thing, that doesn't have to be your thing. If you're like toiling away at like a law degree, but really you just want to write, I say this as an English major, just go study literature. Like don't feel obligated because you think that whatever university you're attending is just a job factory. That shouldn't be what college is.
I'll jump in because you're right. You need to be passionate about what you do. And I've been very lucky at every institution I've worked at. I've absolutely loved my job. Even probably the most stressful times, I'm still grateful and thankful I get to work with students and the people that I do. But other than money, time is also a factor. So I think my advice would be find a place where you could also be, number one, your authentic self. I often lead with the fact that I'm Chicana, I'm a geek, and I'm a woman. Mm-hmm. And I'm very lucky that every institution I've worked, I've been able to be that open with my fandom, but it also helps me build relationships with my department, and I have a very large department, a large group of people I work with, but there's a number of us that play Pokemon Go. There's a smaller number getting into Wizards Unite right now. One of my staff members, Corey's Corey, the biggest Marvel fan I know, and I know he's always coordinating the movie outings after work for Marvel. And it's being okay that our lunchtime conversations sometimes bridge into the geek world, which I apologize to my staff members who are not geeks. Mm-hmm. But we have a lot of fun, and I foster that environment in the department that during lunch, have the fun. They even said one time when Smash Brothers came out, hey Emily, could we hook up a Nintendo Switch after work on the office in the conference room television? I said yes, and let me know what day so I could be there. So places where you could be your authentic self are so important. And the time aspect, when you're passionate about it, I said a year ago, and I'm still haven't made progress on it, but I have an idea for a book about geek culture and connection and engagement outside of the classroom on a college campus, and an anthology that many people in this room could contribute a chapter to. And that's still something I'm playing around with, but oftentimes the real job gets in the way of the time to spend on my passions. So I'm trying to find that balance, because I've chosen to continue to move up in student affairs. So my time is a little more stretched sometimes, but I'll get there.
I think for me is to recognize that you have to be in control and be unapologetically yourself. I think sometimes it's very easy to fall into a mindset of the environment, the expectations that's set on us, the things that we are quote unquote supposed to do or supposed to act, and sometimes lose ourselves in that. But I also think it's really important that you take some time to pause and to say, you know, who am I really? What do I want to project? What sphere of influence do I have around me? And so when times I thought of like, okay, how do I want to express myself at work? The first thing was I can decorate my office into a DC shrine. And you know what? No one can say anything about it.
Even if it's DC?
Even if it's DC. And I constantly, yes, I have impassioned discussions with people who are Marvel fans, but you know what? That's okay because my office is DC.
Not everyone can be perfect.
Exactly. Not everyone can be perfect. So I think taking that opportunity to recognize what is important to you and how do you want to do your self-expression is really important, and to bring some of that authenticity into the work that you do.
I'll add one more thing. I mean, just in terms of like the advice of like the process to get, because I think it's just this tall order of just like, you know, yeah, find something that you really enjoy and do that. And, you know, because I think I'd be remiss, like I have learned so much working more in like digital education spaces, and there's so many different ways to like take short courses, just one-off, that are like only a month or two long, lower cost, online degree programs, like boot camps, and like they cover a whole, you know, litany of content areas. And I know for me, a previous panel, there was somebody from UC Irvine, and they have a series of short courses on esports, and I took one of those, and it was amazing. And I'm just like, that idea of like, how is esports coming into the collegiate environment? I'm like, some way, somehow, maybe I'll like kind of head in that direction. But it like allowed me to like, within a very short amount of time, dramatically increase my knowledge and like meet all these other people that are either working in the industry or are also interested in it. So just so many different educational platforms and opportunities, and then also just coming out to stuff like this is an amazing step of conferences and events and things that might be not, you know, sort of top of mind, or, you know, the things that people would think of first. Like if there's like all those standard options, we're like, well, everybody goes to, you know, this monthly event or something. It's like, well, what else can I do? Like, what's something that's maybe a little bit, you know, sort of chasing more what I'm looking for. So I know working in higher ed, there's kind of like a standard list of the organizations and things that you are kind of expected to be a part of, but stuff like this, or South by Southwest, or there's like online learning organizations and events that go on. For me, I'm like, I want to try to go there, because I feel like that's where I'm going to meet even more different people, because I've already tried everything else and I've kind of had a foundation there. So it's, and again, it's not a zero-sum game. It's like I can go to all of them, right? You know, you can start to just like kind of diversify and mix up what you think are just the only options you have. It's like, I think there's so many other great opportunities for learning and connection out there.
And I think one other thing, I'm sorry to keep going on this, but I think in a lot of like the nerdy or geeky in pursuits, like a lot of the barriers to entry are kind of lower than they used to be. Like, if you set your expectations right, like if you're just thinking like, I want to be a comic book artist and I'm going to work for DC, like that, you know, that's not realistic. But DC and Marvel aren't the only games in town. You know, like there's what I was actually talking to some publishers last night, and like right now the comics industry is quite beautiful, because it's not just the two superheroes, right? It's, you have Boom Studios, you have Image is kind of like third biggest now. But like you have Boom Studios, you have Lion Forge. You used to have Lion Forge. Sorry. You have like a Wave Blue World, which is a new publisher. Like and you have comics, Comixology doing digital comics. You have Kickstarter. Like there's so many barriers to entry that are kind of gone now in the digital age. Or if you want to be on YouTube, if you want to do a podcast, like there are ways to pursue like your nerdy passions without thinking I have to work for Marvel. I have to do my podcast and do like, I don't know, parachute sheet reads. You know what I'm saying? Like if you set your expectations, not set them lower, but like more realistic, you can still pursue the thing you want to do and do it and excel at it, and without thinking like, well, I'm not drawing from Marvel, so I'm a failure.
Right.
Well, because I think like some people have like fostered small but very dedicated audiences, and that's sometimes all you need. If you have like several hundred really committed fans, that could be enough if you're streaming, podcasting, writing, drawing, or whatever, versus like a very limited view of what success means. Great for everybody, especially great for students as you're kind of forming conceptions of what it means to be successful, like adult and those sort of things. So I think that's really great. Really great advice.
Well, and it made me think about having a broader view of what you want to go into or what's open to you. So can you share with everyone what your undergrad degree was? Like mine was applied mathematics, so math and computer science.
Mine was English literature.
Creative writing, poetry.
History with a minor in leadership.
Political science.
Humanities, what's up?
So, what it's saying is that really any of the majors can take you in any of the directions. It's not that you have to think once you're committed to one thing that somehow determines your path for life. Yeah.
Well, I also want to add, as a professional, there's a lot of education professionals, higher ed, K-12, who I've known have taken those transferable skills, because we often talk about our students, right? And we've talked about those of us that exude our geek passions, and I'm thinking about friends that I know who are artists and also work in higher education, P. Doodles, follow her, Lisa Slavin. But I've also had friends who've taken their transferable skills from higher ed and student affairs into Google, into Disney. So also noticing within ourselves that we have other talents that could be utilized even outside of what we do into geeky companies that we might really like.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so we're starting to run a little bit short on time. I'm going to ask one more question of the panel, and then if you all have questions that you want to ask, we'll have a little bit of time for that. But are there any promising career pathways that you see coming up for students these days?
Just to echo previous sessions here today, I mean, for me, like I took a course on it, so I'm like really plugged into like esports and streaming and those sort of things. I think to me, it's very promising because I've known some people and talked to them on my podcast that stream full time. Like they're able to like be freelance, remote, flexible. They're building community, communication, and like branding and all that. Like all that stuff is super like important, and it again would be transferable if you choose to do a lot of other things. So I think at least supporting the kind of learning and educational outcomes of things like esports and being on like a team and doing that kind of stuff, I feel like that is really exciting to me. And also again working in like the digital space, an online student for an institution or a commuter student or an adult learner could be just as engaged as a residential student. So I think it really can kind of democratize involvement there. But yeah, I mean, I think I'm seeing I think a lot of promise in things like, like digital media and analytics and like project management and like any of these things where it's just like, you're learning a specialization, but it's also like really applicable in a lot of different areas. So like if you're getting into like, yeah, I can like make really great graphics and art and do whatever, it's like a lot of people need good branding and good imagery and like all that kind of stuff. So if you really like to draw or just make things like that, getting any sort of credential, whether it's a certificate or taking short courses or any of that, even start to do that as like a side project. But and even for me, like seeing that there's more education going into like craft beer, like just like really like hobby, like things that have been hobbies for a really long time for people, you can get kind of quantified learning and parlay that to be like, you know what, I would really love to like work in that space. Like, again, there's so many great educational platforms and opportunities to help like distinguish yourself and get you in the direction that you want to go. So those are some of the things that I feel like are promising pathways, like, you know.
Can I just throw public service? I think a lot of, we think a lot, you know, we always think of private industry when we think about getting work, but I think there are a lot of public service jobs that these skills are, and when you're a nerd and when you're passionate, like I think that helps because, you know, you feel, you know, they call us the Justice League for a reason, you know, and you believe in justice, and I feel like if you have the kind of like moral clarity, you know, you should follow a path in public service too. Mm-hmm. Because we need that now more than ever.
No kidding. Anybody else? Okay. So do any of you have questions for our panelists? Go ahead. From the look of the panelists, no, that's never happened before.
It depends if they're Marvel fans, right?
Yes. I can start. So many, many moons ago, I thought I was going to be a lawyer. So I worked in this like law firm for an internship, and I came one day wearing a Batman t-shirt and underneath like a blazer. I thought it was fine, you know, that's business casual, right? And my supervisor came to me and said, you know, that's really great. However, you know how they try and sneak in, you know, lay it soft. And they told me that the shirt wasn't appropriate. And at first I was really bummed out, and I was like, oh, but this is, you know, my thing. But going back to it, recognizing what is my sphere of influence, what can I do once I got that pushback. So if a whole t-shirt is inappropriate, then I wore a Batman lapel pin the entire time. So really trying to find the things that I could do and really operate within that sphere of influence. And I think at first hearing that no was a sting because it was a form of my self-expression, but then trying to find a different medium where I could have that self-expression. So if it's a smaller thing to appear, you know, more professional, that's fine. But I really trying to operate in my realm and make the most of that.
Shout out to Hero Within. It's a clothing company that makes like nerdy formal wear. Like, so you can wear like button downs and like dresses and blazers with like the bat on it, and it's dope.
Really?
So check out Hero Within.
I will second that. I've like been like, oh, what do we want to get? But I think it's a good thing. Like, I don't think we've all faced that like full, you know, kind of brunt of kind of people pushing back on it, because I've had quite the opposite. But I think it is just like, yeah, different industry, like working in a law firm, probably acknowledge that like they're probably not going to have you be like, oh, I could just wear whatever I want kind of thing, adjust when you need to. But again, just the diversity of opportunities out there, acknowledging where like I think great places allow for people just to dress to the day kind of thing. If it's like, hey, we do have somebody like visiting, maybe dress up. If not, like be comfortable and just get your work done kind of thing. So I'm grateful, at least I've been in environments that have been very supportive. But yeah, I think the advice would be like, you know, don't like push on that, I guess, too much, but yeah.
Yeah, and I think also as you move up, potentially where you are, if you can role model that it is
Right.
entirely possible to have the Funko Pop in your office and still be a professional, that it helps to that. Brian, actually I'll shout out to Brian, who's right here. He and I both have all sorts of nerdy things in our offices, and they're very tasteful. And so I think people enjoy them quite a bit and have seen them long enough, one, to ask about them, but also just to be fine with the fact that they're there.
Yeah.
And did you have a question? Okay. That's fine.
That's fine.
As an RCC student to be with many ideas on paper, where would you recommend I put myself out there at the start?
And what's RCC? Ah, okay. Did you all hear the question?
Yes. So it was, as an RCC student to be with ideas on paper, where would we recommend that you start? visit Artist Alley, talk at cons, and not just at San Diego Comic-Con, but even look at the smaller cons, WonderCon. There's a smaller comic convention, I think, in Ontario that just happened a little bit ago. So go talk to artists, both writers, people who draw, show them your ideas, talk with them. I found that they're really open and willing to talk with up-and-coming students, and they're willing to share their ideas. So smaller conventions are awesome for that. Go to the panels where writers exist. Ideas on papers, I'm not sure if you're drawing or you have ideas for short films, both. Comics, go to those smaller conventions, but don't be afraid to approach them. Even at the larger cons like this, they're very open to talk with young people, especially about their ideas and fostering that.
And then also to start off, it could be really nerve-wracking, and sometimes you might be afraid to hear no, unfortunately. But take that as a challenge of feedback for you to continue to work and grow on your craft. So continue writing everything, do a brain dump, start a blog, start putting things down on paper and start sharing it. Share it with your friends who give you honest feedback, share it with your family, share it through different mediums, and absolutely explore those avenues that Emily just suggested.
Yeah, and I'd say, yeah, definitely have just like some sort of digital home so that people can find you. I mean, I love Twitter because that's just the way I've made a lot of connections for like people to podcast or just like interesting people to follow. And depending on if it's more of a visual medium, obviously Instagram is huge for that. Or like, Reddit. There's some very engaging like communities there for like very niche things. And again, it's like you don't have to be like, oh, whatever I'm doing needs to have like millions upon millions of viewers and stuff like that. You can find kind of target audiences to share things with. But I think it's definitely very helpful to have some sort of digital home that people can find you at. Like, I mean, if LinkedIn page, you know, even this kind of like the baseline. So.
Yeah, thanks for asking that. So I think we're just about out of time. We'll hang out here for a little bit after the session in case you have questions that you didn't get a chance to ask. But thanks so much for being with us. And then the next session is Caring for the Nerd Mind at noon. Yes, thank you.